I'm going to take you on and I asked Matt what he wanted me to present on, and we talked about it, and we decided that we really wanted to focus on my story, which I thought was kind of interesting, that he wanted me to focus on my story. So first of all, how many of you know who Reid Hoffman is in the audience? Several. Founder of LinkedIn, right? So LinkedIn's going to come up a couple times in my presentation because it's how I built my ecosystem in Jacksonville. He has one of the best quotes ever about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs are people that are crazy enough to jump off a cliff and assemble the airplane on their way down. And I've spent my entire life trying to find that next cliff to jump off of. So let me tell you a little bit about Bootleg Advisors, not from what the company does, but how I came up with that crazy brand thanks to a local partner of mine on ideas. So I grew up in rural Brazil, Indiana, in a pretty poor family. My mom and my dad were the first ones to ever go to graduate high school. My dad was the first one in his family to ever get his driver's license. My cousin Scarlett was the first person to ever get a 2-year degree. By getting the 2-year degree, she showed me that I could get out of my little crappy hometown and do something different because she went to the big city as a lab technician. I became the first one to get a 4-year degree. My daughter and my niece became the first ones to get an advanced degree. My daughter is now a practicing architect. And so I'm saying that to kind of lay the foundation. When I called up Wes Herford of On Ideas and said, Wes, I got great news. He goes, what's that? I said, the board finally, after 3 times, has accepted my letter of resignation. I said, so I got 1, good news, 2, big challenge. He goes, what's the challenge? I go, got to figure out what to call this company. He goes, well, I got this exercise called brand speed dating. And I go, and he's driving from Charleston to Jacksonville. What the hell's brand speed dating? He said, here's how it's going to work. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to tell me a story. You're not going to give me a short answer. You're going to tell me a story. Based on that story, I'm going to give you 3 pieces of information that I want you to write down. 1, an iconic brand that your story reminds me. 2, a famous person in history not attached to that iconic brand. 3, what I think you could call your company. Because we're going to continue this exercise until you get to the point that you're like, oh my gosh, pencils down, love it, that's what I have to be called. He goes, you will not only have a brand that you love and couldn't imagine being called anything else, but you will really know your why, and you will know your business model, and it'll take less than 2 hours. I said, Wes, that sounds like a load of crap to me. This usually takes 6 months. And he goes, I'm doing it for free. I'm driving. Do you want to do this or not? He goes, you got a pen and paper? I said, sure. So he starts asking me general questions. What's your company going to do? So I tell him. What markets are you selling into? So I tell him. Who's your primary buyer in those markets? We have that conversation, tell him a story. Why would that company want to buy that from you? Especially at that level. So I tell him my story. Then we're exactly 28 minutes, because I went ahead and put him on a stopwatch because I just didn't see any way that this was possibly going to work. At 28 minutes, he goes, okay, I think I have all the background information I need on what your company is. He goes, I want to change gears on you. He goes, tell me about your first job. I said, my first job, my first career, or the way I used to make money? And he goes, the third one sounds the most interesting, so let's start there, and we'll loop back to the other 2 if we need to. I said, Wes, well, as you know, my father died whenever I was 12 years old. My mother went from being a Sunday school teacher to a bartender overnight in the poorest city in Indiana. And I didn't take a math genius to realize that my mom was going to make between $125 and $175 a week, depending on tips. It also didn't take a genius to realize that my middle school and high school life was going to suck in a single income household with a parent that's making $125 to $175 a week. I'm like, how can I earn more money? No amount of mowing grass, raking leaves, shoveling snow, running paper routes that I've been doing since I was allowed to was going to change that economic reality. And I had a few mentors, one of which owned a sporting goods store that had his own company. So entrepreneurship has interested me forever. I'm like, man, how can I make some more money? I'm like, got an idea. There's a supply-demand imbalance in my community. Middle school and high school kids really want alcohol on the weekends, but they do not have a reliable supply. So now I got a supply chain problem. My mom is a bartender, but it's not like she's going to sell me alcohol because one, she was just a Sunday school teacher. Two, she could go to jail, and I don't want mom to go to jail. So I've got a supply chain problem. Sitting there racking my brain. Uncle Mike. Uncle Mike has been to jail 6 times. All of Uncle Mike's great stories, and half of his friends are either still in jail or people he met in jail, and all of his funny stories about how he got out into jail. And Uncle Mike will do anything for $20 or a case of beer. So I go to Uncle Mike and I tell him, Uncle Mike, this is what I'm thinking. He goes, that just might work. He goes, but how are you going to deliver the alcohol? I go, you got a car? He goes, oh, no. He goes, delivering liquor to high school kids? He goes, that's big boy jail. He goes, I've never had to be in big boy jail, and I'm not willing to do it for you. But he goes, I can supply you with the alcohol, but you're going to have to figure out how to transport it. I go, well, what are you thinking? He goes, you got a bicycle, don't you? Uncle Mike was a welder by day. We built these 2 huge baskets. And we would load it up with bricks and cinder blocks, and I'd ride it around the block and wreck it. And then we'd modify the suspension until eventually I could actually balance it. I was ready to use my paper route money to buy my first load. Uncle Mike met me in the alley, stocked it up. I would average during the school year 2 to 3 deliveries on a Friday. I could do 6 to 8 on a Saturday. Start off the night by giving Uncle Mike enough money for a case of beer. Every load was an extra $20. Uncle Mike quit his day job as a welder 3 weeks later because he was making more money off of me. So he was technically, I guess, my first employee. And in addition to that, I was netting between $800 and $1,200 a weekend as a 12-year-old. When I tell Wes that story, he goes, iconic brand, Gentleman's Jack Daniels. Famous person in history, Bill the Real McCoy, the original bootlegger. And he goes, and Schultz, you've clearly been a bootlegger your entire life, so the name of your company is Bootleg Advisors. 34 minutes, 53 seconds, pencils down. We're done. And so that's kind of the background. So I'm starting off telling you that to then say that I double majored in mechanical engineering and economics, went to work for Eli Lilly and Company, became their first ever reliability engineer. At the age of 25, I became their global reliability leader. And all of a sudden got to travel all over the world, going to different manufacturing plants. And I still remember what one of my mentors told me, who'd been trying to make money in the maintenance and reliability space for years. He said, John, I don't care what P word you put in front of it. You can call it proactive. You can call it precision. You can call it predictive. You can call it preventative. If you follow that with the word maintenance, nobody wants more of it. But yet, I'm a big believer in your Hedgehog. How many of you read Good to Great? It's a fantastic book. Hedgehog. People are always amazed by the hedgehog because it has no natural predators. And it only has one move. It rolls up into a ball. Businesses also and individuals have a hedgehog. And it's where those 3 circles in the Venn diagram intersect. And what are those 3 circles? Number 1, passion. I was passionate about maintenance and reliability. Number 2, I was convinced that I could become one of the best in the world through continuous learning myself. Number 3, I had to find an economic engine that made sense. Where those 3 circles intersect is your hedgehog. And regardless of what anybody else in the world thinks about your hedgehog, if it's your hedgehog, I guarantee you can figure out how to build a business around it. And that's what I did. And so I left Lilly in 1997 and started a company called Allied Reliability Group. What I love most about my career is that I've gotten to see how the world is made. I've been in over 1,500 manufacturing facilities across 18 different industries in 63 countries. Little small town kid from Indiana delivering liquor on his bicycle, right? And that's what I've been able to do. In 2013, we became private equity backed. I transitioned from chief executive officer to chief innovation officer, where I led our digital transformation. The other thing I will say about an entrepreneur is if you're going to build your company, plan on every 2 to 4 years reinventing yourself and what your role needs to be in the company, because it will change and your people need for you to evolve for the company to evolve. So I became Chief Innovation Officer. And so we built this company up to where we had about 600 people globally. And across, like I said, 18 different industry verticals. And one of the most amazing things about this company that I can say is in December, we actually got the opportunity to do a 9-figure exit to Shell. And again, the thought that some kid that's 12 years old delivering liquor because his mom's a bartender could go on in one of the most, people think, boring fields in the world, but I was passionate about it, and build a company. When I left Lilly, I was 29 years old. I had a mullet down to here, right? I rode a Harley and I drank too much. Since then, I've gotten a haircut. So then with that comes responsibility. Okay? So when I moved to Jacksonville from Charleston, South Carolina, so I went from Indiana to Charleston to Jacksonville, it's kind of been my route. I didn't know anyone. How can I build up a business network whenever I don't know anyone? I decided to go to LinkedIn. And so this is another tip for entrepreneurs or people that want to be entrepreneurs. Jacksonville is one of the most welcoming cities I've ever been associated with. I simply went onto LinkedIn and I tried to find business owners that had what looked to be an interesting company. I'd send them an invite. If they accepted my invite, I'd ask them if they'd like to grab coffee or drinks. If we were going to have coffee, I knew it was going to be an interesting conversation. If we were going to have drinks, I knew we could probably be friends. So during that process, I've had the fortunate opportunity to meet over 150 CEOs of companies here in Jacksonville and have one-on-one with them. In addition to that, that's just on the for-profit side. I've also had the opportunity to meet with over 60 CEOs of nonprofits. Because for this community to thrive, we got to make sure that the investments that we make lift all ships. All boats must rise. The 23rd entrepreneur that I met, and a concept that I want to kind of leave you with before we go into some Q&A, is Jeremy Vaughn from Torreseer. Jeremy, you want to stand up for the audience? Jeremy Vaughn, there's this concept called recycling capital. Anybody? Recycling capital, what does that mean? Recycling capital means that if you had an exit and you find somebody else that has their hedgehog and they're pursuing it, recycle it. I became the first in investor in Torreseer. And the thing is, it has been a heavy lift for this man. And when you get the opportunity, catch him and ask him to tell you the story about what's behind his company and his why. It will really bring a tear to your eye. It has to do with his daughter. Absolutely amazing. The other thing that I'm really happy about to say with Jeremy is the fact he's in the process right now of closing out a seed round as being overfunded. Ron Gula, founder of Tenable, just invested in Jeremy's company right here in Jacksonville. And Jeremy and I started this journey in 2019 together. Proud as hell of you, man. And so that is, that brings me full circle, right? That's what Bootleg Advisors is about. Bootleg Advisors is finding I now have the fortune of having done business with over 40% of the Fortune 1000. I'm able to open doors that oftentimes small stage companies can't get into and get them into Fortune 1000 companies and help them scale when they're ready. Jeremy and I are just now entering into that realm of his journey. Up until this point, he wasn't scalable. He didn't have the financial backing. He didn't have some of the logos. He didn't have some of the other things that he needed. He now has that. He's ready to take off like a rocket ship. And we're going to make that happen. And so that's kind of full circle. Matt, you asked me to leave about 5 minutes for questions, and we're at 5:05.